You know, ever since I finished and platinumed MindsEye on PlayStation 5, that was a catalyst for me for this conversation of when did it become so bad to buy, play, enjoy, maybe even love bad video games? Now, I want to preface the entire thing by saying this game in particular is a very interesting example, if only because of how much stuff keeps coming out about the studio. So Build a Rocket Boy has been going through so many things lately where they're splitting off from their publisher. There's this big expose going on where the CEO is leaving for a small period of time, somebody stepping in, and the studio is just seemingly convinced that there was some sort of smear campaign going on that was funded, and they've been trying to convince themselves of this for a while, that the game actually is better than it seemingly is. And there's just so much going on with that game. We're not really here to discuss all of that per se, as crazy as all of it is, but I do find the game itself is a good example of, you know, it's a title that's not the worst thing in the world, but you would be convinced otherwise that that's been the ongoing narrative, that it is just a steaming dog pile, not worth your time. And I'm here to say, why is it not worth your time? As crazy as that sounds, let me also preface that by saying I stand by this idea of, and I think a lot of people tend to agree with this, of like, you could probably play 9 out of 10 games, 10 out of 10 games all day, every day, not run out of things to play if you like a lot of genres, if you have a very big palette for games. You can probably play the absolute best of the best and just not run out of things to play. We are in a very content-rich era, from premium price titles, big and small, free-to-play titles. There is so much stuff to play. So it's a very obvious begging the question of, well, why would I even humor a game like MindsEye in this very competitive, often saturated environment? And that's a fair question to ask. And so I think for a lot of people, it becomes fairly obvious that, sure, play only the best of the best, value your time, value your money, which is also very important. Games are getting more and more expensive. Wages are not going up. So just to preface the entire conversation, I'm not going to convince you that you have to play MindsEye or other bad video games or spend money and your time on those bad games. But it is something that I often go back to and think about. I mean, I think it's an older way of thinking. You know, certainly if you're a bit older and you've been playing games for a long time, it was a very common thing to simply buy and enjoy these bad video games. And they do sort of transcend that time for people on a personal level of, I think for a lot of us, we have some favorite games out there that they might be 10, 20, 30 years old now at this point, and you really love them and you're very nostalgic for them, even though on paper they're bad games. And it's always funny sometimes hearing a story from somebody where it's like, yeah, I finally went back to play that game that I loved dearly, and oh no, the rose-tinted glasses, they're totally cracked. That game was actually terrible and you don't want to play it. But there's also just that angle of like games age in a certain way over time. So certain gameplay mechanics, quality of life fixes, things like that. Once you're more accustomed to modern games, it can typically be very hard to go back to those older titles. Some age much better than others, obviously, but you know, certain titles still do hold up reasonably speaking, and you still might be able to totally enjoy that game on the PlayStation 2 that you know is considered, like, widely considered a bad video game, but every time you go back, you play it, you do get some value out of it, and you really enjoy the experience of it. And so that's sort of like where I still come from, and that's how I can still pick up and play a game like MindsEye. And well, one, I want to investigate that game myself. I mean, it's so easy in this internet environment for us to have a narrative be built around a certain product, and it will seemingly convince you it is the worst thing in the world out there. Finally playing MindsEye myself, now granted, I had 2 or 3 patches installed on the game at that point, so I wasn't running into major technical hiccups that people were posting on Twitter. And the game is still 30 FPS. It's not a totally sound game, but by the time I played it, it was something where I'm just sitting there wondering, okay, where's like the absolute worst, mega terrible stuff? When is that stuff going to show up? And it never came. What I got was a fairly generic, bad writing, sci-fi, third-person shooter game, and like, I still had my fun with it. There were totally good moments in there that I thought were funny and goofy. I liked the nighttime environment of Vegas. I liked the very inoffensive third-person shooting, and like, don't get me wrong, I had those other moments of, oh, there's so many weird quality of life, lack of quality of life things going on in this game, like no map and having to walk everywhere if you don't have a car. And certain levels are designed in a manner where you're just doing nothing for an extended period of time. Those moments did happen for me in that game. Okay. Okay, can we figure out the camera for the parking garage? What is going on? You really made me just like sit here and wait and watch this slow-ass rocket move? It took how long? Nothing happened. What the flying f was that about? What a waste of time. Alright, what the f? What is this, Final Fantasy VII? What is with these stairs? Why are you stopping me? I'd rather just like drive past this. I see what they were doing, what they were going for. I did not hate this game. But once I got to the end, it felt very much like a 6 out of 10 game for me, which I just wouldn't call the worst thing in the world, and it's so easy to laugh and dogpile on it, and I know that's where the conversation is nowadays with video games in general. But that's also the issue with a lot of these games just seemingly not being able to survive and get a second chance. Yeah, that's the other funny thing about a lot of older titles, and definitely like the PS2 generation and below. I mean, PS3 and up is I think where you started to see these games be a bit more victim to just how much more crowded it was, and the early online conversations, so people were a lot more privy to, like reviews came out for this game and it's seemingly not very good. PS2 and below, I mean, you had your monthly magazines, those had reviews, but it was really landlocked to just people that you knew and talked about with games at school, for example. And even then, you might not have seen a magazine review for that PlayStation 2 game you were excited to pick up. It's definitely a mediocre game by a lot of standards, but you as a kid not knowing any better and your group of friends, you all really enjoyed it. Enough people bought the game because it was able to overcome any sort of narrative that the game didn't have, any sort of conversation, and it got a sequel and then another sequel. And we see a lot of modern, certainly AAA games that with publishers that are very risk averse, they can't overcome that, especially with SIE titles, for example, right? So like Days Gone came out, mediocre reviews. Now we know Days Gone 2 didn't even pass Ben's own internal pitching, so they never even pitched Days Gone 2 to Sony. Ben themselves chose not to do it, but there's that. Ready at Dawn, for example, with The Order 1886. It was always a very enlightening thing to find out from that conversation from one of the co-founders, Andrea Pacino, speaking with Ben Hansen, that he was very convinced in this idea of if our Metacritic scores were just a tad better, we probably would have gotten a sequel. Because the game sold reasonably very well. But SI is also a very boutique publisher, and they care about the critical reception of their games. A game like The Order 1886 would have gotten a sequel all day, every day with those sales numbers in the PS1, PS2 era. But it's not like that anymore. It's just something to think about. It's food for thought. It's not me trying to convince you of this idea that you have to be buying and playing bad video games. But, it's something I guess it's worth airing out and considering that, like, every so often, I think there's a lot of value to buying and playing a MindsEye. Just for the sheer fact that you are going to laugh at it, have a good time, maybe be a little bit annoyed, but that also gives you that nice gap of, ooh, MindsEye was terrible, and right now I'm going through Ghost of Yotei and seeing what a high caliber experience really is like again. Now you could play those again all day, every day, but I really like those palate cleansers of, MindsEye. This is the goofiest dialogue I've ever seen. Why are you making me run to the car? And in a masochistic sort of way, I really enjoyed that. But hey, let me know what you think. Just some food for thought. Thank you all for joining me in this conversation. I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.